Let me tell you about the scariest realization I had after I left my abusive, violent ex-husband. I had heard of domestic violence just like any other normal person, and just like anyone else would think, you're supposed to leave the abuser, right? Like that's a no-brainer. What people tend to forget is that nobody is immune to it. The scariest realization I had wasn't the shame associated with divorce. It wasn't knowing that I had made a terrible mistake, and it wasn't even leaving him and being alone and starting from scratch again. The scariest realization was that just a few days after, a little voice crept into my head that said, give him another chance. Take him back. Hey, I'm Vanessa. I'm a nurse, an advocate for women's rights, and a survivor of domestic violence. And I'm here to talk to you today about common myths, misconceptions, and things you should know about domestic violence from somebody who's lived it and who is thriving now. Welcome to my community. I'm so glad you're here. And I hope by the end of this video, you get some value from it, whether you've been through it, you're currently going through it, or whether you have a friend that needs some help. Quick pause before I continue. I do want to iterate that we are talking about domestic abuse today. If you're in a raw place, protect your peace. Pause this, come back later, or watch with someone safe. Resources are in the description box below, including the line for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And if you're currently in an unsafe home, remember your history can be monitored. There's also info below on browsing safely. Okay, we ready? Let's get into it. So I don't think I've ever come on here and made a video about my story specifically, and I'm not going to be going into it today. But if you do want to know my full story in very much detail, I've been on multiple podcasts where I talk about it for hours. I have them all linked below, so if you want to pause and get into my story first, you definitely can. But I will give you a brief synopsis of it. I was 22, we met on a dating app. He used religion as a way to manipulate me and take control. He manipulated me into marriage, hiding a deeply controlling and jealous human being behind the cloak of faith. 3 weeks into our marriage, he strangled me and gave me a black eye. But unlike many survivors who are pressured into silence, I was able to get out in 3 weeks with the support of my family. I left, I reported him, and over the span of the next 15 months after that, the state of California charged him with 2 felonies. Today, as a nurse and an advocate, I share my story so that others, especially the Desi community, know that faith is never a license for control, and reporting your abuser is not shame. It doesn't destroy your life. It creates justice for you and the women to follow. So now this brings me to my 8th myths and 5 misconceptions that I want to talk to you about today regarding divorce and domestic violence. Because myths aren't just wrong, they're loaded with a lot of ammunition. But I will warn you ahead of time that a lot of the stuff that I'm about to talk about can be a little controversial. Reminder that this is something that I experienced, so this is taken from my experience personally, and it's taken in the realm of growing up as a first-gen Bangladeshi American. I still dealt with a lot of the cultural implications that somebody would in the Desi community as well. This is my fair warning to you. Let's get into it. Myth number 1, a religious man is a safe man. In our community, it's like piety is treated as a background check. He prays, he knows his deen, auntie verified, 5 stars, marry him. Here's what nobody says out loud. Religion doesn't screen out abuse. In fact, what it can do is dangerously equip the manipulative ones. I know because it happened to me. Like for many people, he used that one thing I held very sacred as a leash, framing control as protection, jealousy as love, and obedience as blind faith. And that has a name. It's called spiritual abuse. And it's one of the least talked about forms of manipulation and abuse out there. A man quoting scripture, all the while making you afraid of him at the back of your mind. It's not devout. They're armed and they know what they're doing. The best way to judge someone's character is not the level in which they portray themselves as religious, but seeing their character and seeing if it actually reflects the deen. Myth number 2, real abuse takes years to show up. So if it happened fast, you probably missed a few of the signs, and that's on you. Let me reiterate this. He hit me 3 weeks into our marriage, and before that, there was screaming, there was yelling, there was punching walls. But he never did strike me until after we had gotten married. And I promise you, people's first instinct is to guess What did I miss? Why did I not see it sooner? Why did I ignore the signs? As if divorce comes with like a 2-year onboarding experience and we're all so sweet, just automatically experts. We're human. We want to give people good chances. And especially when you're young, you think anyone is malleable to being better. But let me give you some honest truth here. True abusers don't escalate on a schedule. They escalate especially when they think you're locked in and you're not going to leave. And that is such an important point. And nothing says locked in like a marriage. The wedding isn't about when the abusers relax, it's when the mask that they had to portray finally becomes optional. My rule of thumb is to start questioning a relationship when there's constant yelling. And when it gets to a point where the abuser starts hitting objects around you, whether it's the wall, whether it's something you really like, because if they can hit something else, they can eventually, and you can put two and two together. Myth number 3, an intense, serious love whirlwind. That's how men in love court. That's normal. That's how serious men pursue marriages. I say this especially in the Desi community. When somebody seeks you out, hides under the facade that they just know you're the one within a few days or a couple of weeks within knowing you, tells you I love you, gives you a whirlwind romance. Most of the time it's love bombing and future faking, and that is the biggest form of camouflage we have in the Desi community. We are sold the story that a man who moves fast, wants marriage immediately, wants your whole life merged by his by month 2. But that's not a red flag. That's a rishta success story. Some aunties will even say, that's not alarming, but they'll say something like, mashallah, he's so serious. The truth is, we have to be the own judge of someone's intentions. Intensity is not intimacy. Urgency is not devotion. And the sneaky thing is sometimes speed is the best strategy for abusers. And for me, that's exactly what happened. I was fed the fantasy of being married, of having a halal relationship, that I ignored all the red flags. Marriage was going to fix us. Myth number 4, and this I carry it very deep into my heart, and this is something that I struggled with so much. You chose him for yourself. You fought for him. You wanted to marry him. You have to deal with it. Here's a cruelty specific to our generation. If your marriage was arranged and it failed, shame in society feels like it falls to the family. But in this generation, if you chose him, if you went on a dating app, you fought for him, you said you loved him, you convinced your parents, the failure is yours alone. You picked him. What did you expect? But the truth is, being deceived is not choosing badly. I didn't choose an abuser. I didn't even make a mistake. I was manipulated, as most women are who fall into the hands of abusive men. Con artists don't reflect poorly on the people they con. So if you're going through something like this, give yourself some grace and change the narrative that you didn't make a mistake, but you were manipulated. Myth number 5, smart, educated, strong women don't end up in abusive relationships. Abuse isn't some sort of like intelligence test, and being victimized is not a personality flaw. If you're sitting here thinking, I'm too smart for something like this to happen to me, that exact belief can be the fatal reason why smart women stay silent when it happens to them. Because admitting to it almost feels like you're admitting to stupidity. And it was never that. I'll paint you this picture. I was in college. I used to work at a psych facility. I was on my way to med school, and it still happened to me. No one is immune to abuse. No one is immune to violence. That's why our biggest tool is to educate ourselves and speak out when something happens so that we have support. Because oftentimes not, our own minds can play tricks on us. Myth number 6, it's so easy to spot a survivor. They look so broken. Survivors are painted as like shattered, fragile, broken, flinching. But meanwhile, especially when I was going through it, I was showing up for 40 hours a week at work, going through school. In truth, survivors are some of the most highly functioning people because we've had pretty much professional training in the everything's fine under pressure. If you're waiting for survivors to look the part, you're kind of walking past us every single day. What we want, especially when we're currently going through it or have just left a abusive situation, is for people to ask us how we're doing without any judgment. Sometimes, even if we're saying the story out loud over and over again, that's all we have for comfort. If you have a friend that needs that sort of comfort, definitely ask them how they are. And if they dismiss you, that's fine. You don't have to bring it up again. But it is so isolating going through something like that and then feeling like you're a burden, so you never want to bring it up. Myth number 7, one of my favorites to talk about. It's not really tangible abuse unless he hits you. And unless he hits you, you should give him more and more chances. So this myth was the difference between me getting married or me escaping long before he first laid a hand on me. Here's a fact that I need you to remember from this entire video. Financial abuse happens in 99% of physically violent relationships. Emotional abuse is always a precursor to physical abuse. Abuse in general is enough to end any relationship, and it should be done as soon as possible. That's why if something like that even comes to your mind, you need to speak out loud on it so you have other people to talk to about it, especially a therapist. Financial abuse is one of the number one reasons why people stay in relationships, because it's really hard to run away with an empty wallet. I'll tell you as a psych nurse, injuries that are not physical often take the longest to heal. And if you're asking, does that situation count? Does this situation count? Honey, if you're having to ask, I'm pretty sure it counts. Myth number 8, people in our culture are just passionate. We can't compare ourselves to other cultures. Yeah, so he yells. That's kind of normal in my family. So I grew up in a household that, yeah, there was some yelling. When you see your parents yelling, you think, you know what? They yell at each other. They're like 30 years under their belt. They're still together. It's pretty normal. I want to come here and tell you, like, that's absurd. And we are here to break those generational curses because we do not want yelling in our houses. Yelling is abusive. And I feel like a lot of us in the Desi community can relate. Yelling, especially when it's one-sided, is a major form of control. And this is a generation that stops that and stops tolerating it. Okay, I do want to talk about a few misconceptions regarding domestic violence and divorce that I personally have run across myself. So the first misconception is she's sharing it publicly, she's doing it for attention. She can't get over it, she's not over her ex. I speak publicly about life after divorce and how to create an abuse-free life. You caught me. I'm a clout chaser. Out of all the topics that I could be talking about, I chose domestic violence because it's trendy. Famously, domestic violence is the easiest road and a zero cost to my love life, family dynamics, or mental health. The truth is, survivors who choose to talk about their stories absorb judgment, absorb the disbelief of society, and all the trolls so that survivors do not have to be alone. The reward is that all those DMs that say, I left because of your story. That is why we do what we do. Because I used to be 22 years old and have no one to turn to, no one like me on social media. I remember how isolating it was, and that is just not acceptable anymore. Misconception number 2, poor thing, she's been through so much, she's so fragile, let's not bring it up at all. After I did go public, a lot of people started handling me like I was made up of glass, not realizing the strength that was building inside of me, being able to share what was going on and being able to create a community that also wanted to talk about it. It is so important for you to have those check-ins with your friends who are going through this. They feel isolated. They feel like they can't talk to anyone. They feel like a burden. Survivors don't need you to tiptoe. We just need you to normally ask questions, check in on us, and show us non-judgmental support. And trust me when I say this, we know we have to leave, but you judging us for not leaving in a way that fits the correct, ideal way to leave is not hard. It almost shrinks us down a little bit more. Misconception number 3. So she's screwed for life. She has terrible judgment in relationships. She's never going to be able to trust anyone ever again. I mean, facts, but it's not all true. What I learned from that horrible experience was that I needed to be a lot more careful. And when I did eventually find love again, I was a lot more informed about what a healthy love should look like. And I was a lot more selective. Me and my husband, we just celebrated 7 years together. So I just want to say that it is possible to find a healthy, safe love out there, especially after dealing with domestic violence. Misconception number 4. That's all she is now, an abuse survivor. That's her label. Women who publicly speak out about this, it's not their whole personality anymore. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an auntie, I'm a wife, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and I'm a friend. There's so many things I am that come before being an abuse survivor. One chapter is not the spine of our book. And misconception number 5, if she's doing well now and if she's thriving, it must have not been that bad. I think I had a friend say to me a couple of years ago, you went through all that and now look at your life, it looks so great. Whereas, I went through something similar and things are just still awful for me. It must have been worse for me. I know it is easy to compare what you see on the outside. What I feel like is not said is that survivors get an impossible performance review almost. When you're too sad, they say, she needs to move on. When you're too happy, they say, it must have not been that bad. She's doing it for attention. She was lying. Healing well is not a proof that it didn't happen. It's just proof that the abuser didn't win. And it shows the strength of the individual that is day in and day out putting in the work to show up for themselves. My smile is the receipt of the work that I put in for the past 8 years. Part 2. The challenges that no one warned me about dealing with divorce and domestic violence. The first one is the judgment that I invented in my head. One of the most eye-opening things that happened to me when I was in therapy was a realization that the abuse wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. I'm like, I fell for him. I'm a dumbass. Why did I fall for this? I thought so low of myself. And there really wasn't another resource out there to tell me otherwise. The day I realized that the abuse wasn't my fault was one of the most freeing, uplifting moments, shout out to my therapist, of my life. That created a snowball effect on me realizing that I was severely manipulated and that wasn't normal. See, the community didn't have to punish me. I was already punishing myself. And it wasn't until I just stopped and looked up and reframed the way I thought did I realize that people weren't looking at me and judging me. They were looking at me trying to give me support, but I wasn't ready to receive it. I read pity into faces that were just concerned. Another major thing that happened to me was falling into depression and having PTSD due to a traumatic event, which led me to take antidepressants. Before I started taking antidepressants, there was a period of time where I was pretty much a shell of a person. And I wanted to be happy for my family. I wanted to smile for them, but I just physically couldn't. There was just nothing behind my eyes. It was a struggle to live every single day because you were still so trauma bonded to your abuser. And unfortunately, that's something a lot of people forget. So for those who are going through it, lean on your loved ones, lean on the community, leave on a domestic violence shelter. There are a lot of free resources out there. You don't have to do this alone. And then there comes the paperwork of survival. I will be making a separate video about this because it's so important, the legal process that I took to fully get separated and convict my ex-abuser. But the paperwork of survival is no joke. Doing something like I had reported my abuser, and that meant I filed for divorce and filed for a restraining order, both of which got granted. But these things take money. It puts on a severe financial burden for the person leaving. Again, there are resources out there that can help you. Just look on your states, look at the resources from your specific state that the crime had happened, and you'll be surprised at what you can find. I was able to get compensation for moving out of state, any sort of damage that was given to me, any sort of property that I lost as a result of leaving due to the physical abuse. I was able to get some compensation back. So look into it. In addition to that, I did report my abuser, and it took 15 months of calls, paperwork, saying my story, going into court to finally get him convicted as well. And I think the biggest challenge for me was finally learning who I was. Before I'd gone through domestic violence, I feel like my life is marked in who I was and who I am now. And who I am now is someone that I can be so proud of. But rediscovering who I am kind of from a clean slate is really what gave me any hope of survival. Give yourself the chance, bet on yourself. Last part, you guys, things that genuinely surprised me post divorce. I grieved so hard for somebody who physically assaulted me, and I felt insane for it. It was the most mind-numbing thing I had experienced in my life. Why am I grieving somebody who tried to kill me? Because I wasn't just mourning the person that assaulted me, I was mourning the future I had planned for myself, the version of that person that presented to me before things got bad. And if you're going through this right now, I want you to know that you are not crazy, you're not insane, and these feelings are very real. Another thing is that peace felt very wrong at first. And what I mean by that is, when you're leaving like an abusive relationship, just like, hell yeah, freedom, like you did this, you're that bitch. You are, but it just feels so wrong because it hurts so much. I'm just like thinking about in Bollywood, like the epic sound of someone leaving, but then the movie cuts off and no one shows the months and years of like trying to heal from that. And I want you to know that don't let your internal shame keep you from accepting open arms from people who really care about you. Sometimes we're so caught in our cycle of feeling shame for what happened to us that we don't want to let other people in. But truth is, most of us, if not all of us, especially this community, we're happy to welcome you with open arms and be there for you. Another thing that genuinely surprised me was my shameful story kind of became my superpower. The thing that I was telling myself to bury, the thing that society taught me to bury, are the reasons why there's hundreds of thousands of women now that I have been able to connect with and build a community with. At this point, I think I've received over hundreds of personal messages saying, "You're the reason I'm getting through it. You give me hope. I left my abuser because of you. You're the reason why I still have been no contact for X amount of time." That's the reason why we're all doing this. And if you ever need somebody to talk to, I am just a DM away. And last but not least, I've been so surprised at how grand of a way joy came back, obnoxiously, unapologetically, in a way that I've learned to appreciate joy more. And I'm so grateful that I get to live this life now. And I just want every one of y'all to get there, because we go through enough. Well, it's time to wrap up. If you remember anything from this video, please remember this. If you're in it right now, you're not crazy. You are not weak, and you are not alone. Statistically, you are surrounded by a lot of sisters and brothers out there you can't see. The confusion you feel is a symptom of what's being done to you and what has been done purposefully to manipulate you. And you don't need a bruise to justify wanting to leave an abusive situation. If you've left, whether it took 1 attempt or 7, I'm very proud of you. You did the bravest thing ever. And if you're here to understand someone else, believe survivors the first time. Ask them, are you safe? Is there anything I can do? And never, why are you still there? Why are you staying? You need to leave, and you know the why. Be one of those reasons why helping a friend leave becomes possible, rather than contributing to their silence. And to my Desi family, our culture is stunning. Our religion is beautiful. I love it all. But silence around abuse is not culture. And it ends with our generation refusing to pass it down. Resources are below. My DMs are open at Anessa Mawani on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Share this with somebody who needs it. You might genuinely change your life today. Bye, you guys.